In the winter of 1965, a Polish journalist stumbled upon something that should have remained buried forever. Deep within the mountains of Lower Silesia, among the crumbling remains of Nazi Germany's most classified installations, he found evidence of a project so advanced, so impossibly dangerous, that its very existence defied everything we thought we knew about World War II technology. The document spoke of a device called Die Glocke, the bell, a machine that consumed more electricity than a small city, a machine that killed everyone who came near it, a machine that, according to some, could bend the fabric of reality itself. This is not science fiction. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the story of Nazi Germany's most dangerous secret, a weapon so powerful that even today, 70 years after the fall of the Third Reich, its true purpose remains shrouded in mystery. What was the bell, and could it have changed the outcome of the war? By 1943, the tide of World War II had turned decisively against Nazi Germany. The catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad, the relentless Allied bombing campaigns reducing German cities to ash, the industrial might of America pouring into Europe like an unstoppable flood. Adolf Hitler and his inner circle knew the truth that their propaganda machine worked desperately to conceal. Germany was losing. Conventional warfare would not save the Reich. They needed a miracle. They needed a weapon so revolutionary, so devastating, that it could turn the entire war around in a single stroke. And so, in the darkest corners of the Nazi war machine, far from the front lines and beyond the reach of Allied intelligence, a network of secret projects began to take shape. These were the Wunderwaffen, the wonder weapons. Projects given unlimited resources, staffed by Germany's greatest scientific minds, shielded by layers of security that made them virtually invisible. Some of these projects we know about: the V-2 rocket, the Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter, but others disappeared into history, their secrets buried beneath rubble and silence. Among these forgotten projects was one that would be given the highest classification level in the Reich, a project so sensitive that it operated under multiple code names, a project hidden deep within the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia, in a complex known only as Der Ries the Giant. The story of the bell begins with one man, SS Obergruppen IV, Jakob Spornberg. In the chaos of war's end, as the Reich crumbled around him, Spornberg found himself in Polish custody. During his interrogation in 1945, he spoke of things that seemed impossible. He described a secret project hidden in the mountains, a project that involved a device approximately 9 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet high, a device shaped like a bell. According to Spornberg's testimony, the bell was constructed from a hard, heavy metal, possibly lead or depleted uranium. Inside this outer shell were 2 counter-rotating cylinders. These cylinders contained a mysterious substance the Germans called Serum 525, a violet-colored, mercury-like liquid that glowed when activated. The device required enormous amounts of electricity, so much power that an entire electrical substation was built specifically to supply it. When activated, the bell would emit a strange pulsing hum that could be felt in the bones of anyone nearby. The air around it would shimmer. A metallic taste would fill the mouths of observers. And then something would happen. What exactly happened depends on whose account you believe. But all the reports agree on one thing: the bell was extraordinarily dangerous. The project was overseen by the SS under the direct command of Heinrich Himmler himself. The lead scientist was a man named Dr. Walther Gerlach, though some accounts suggest others were involved, perhaps even including some of Germany's most brilliant physicists, who mysteriously vanished from historical records after 1944. The facility where the bell was housed was not a simple laboratory. It was a vast underground complex, carved into solid rock, reinforced with concrete walls 6 feet thick. The installation was protected by multiple security checkpoints, patrolled by SS guards under orders to shoot on sight any unauthorized personnel. The few workers who were allowed inside the testing chamber were required to wear full protective equipment, heavy rubber suits, face masks, and what appeared to be early radiation protection gear. The testing chamber itself was a circular room with walls lined with ceramic tiles. The floor was covered with a thick rubber mat. Drainage channels ran along the perimeter. Everything about the room's construction suggested the scientists were expecting contamination, radiation, or perhaps something worse. According to the fragmentary records that survived the war, the bell underwent at least 15 major tests between 1943 and 1945. Each test lasted only a few minutes. Each test consumed vast resources, and each test took a terrible toll. Of the 7 scientists and engineers originally assigned to the Bell project, 5 died during the testing phase. Their deaths were not quick. They suffered from symptoms consistent with severe radiation poisoning, internal bleeding, tissue necrosis, organ failure, but there were other symptoms too. Strange symptoms that didn't match any known form of radiation exposure. Some victims developed a crystallized blood structure. Others experienced rapid aging, their bodies deteriorating at an accelerated rate. The exact purpose of the bell remains unclear. Some reports suggest it was an anti-gravity device. Others claim it was an attempt to manipulate time itself. A few accounts describe it as a weapon, something that could create a field of distorted space-time that would tear apart anything caught within it. What we know for certain is that by early 1945, as Soviet forces advanced from the east and American forces closed in from the west, the Nazi high command made a decision. The bell would not fall into enemy hands. On May 8, 1945, Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally. Within weeks, Allied investigators descended upon German territory, searching for secret weapons projects, advanced technology, and the scientists who had created them. This was Operation Paperclip, America's secret program to capture German scientific knowledge before the Soviets could claim it. Teams of Allied intelligence officers swept through Germany, following leads, interrogating prisoners, examining documents. They found rocket scientists. They found jet engine designers. They found chemical weapons facilities and underground factories. But when they reached the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia, they found only ruins. The Die Glocke complex had been systematically destroyed. Bunkers collapsed, tunnels sealed, equipment removed or demolished. And in the center of it all, in what had been the primary testing facility, they found something strange. A massive concrete structure, shaped like a hinge or a portal. It stood alone in a cleared area, surrounded by dead vegetation. The ground beneath it had a peculiar glassy quality, as if the soil itself had been subjected to intense heat. But there were no signs of conventional explosions, no bomb craters, no artillery damage, Whatever had happened here, it wasn't standard demolition. The Allied investigators filed reports. They took photographs. They interviewed local residents who spoke of strange lights in the mountains, of trucks arriving in the dead of night, of prisoners who went into the complex and never came out. And then silence. The files on Der Reis were classified. The concrete structure was left standing, marked only with a few cryptic survey notes. The investigation moved on to other targets, other projects, other mysteries. For 20 years, the bell was forgotten, until 1965, when Polish journalist and researcher Igor Witkowski began investigating Nazi activities in Lower Silesia during the war. Witkowski had access to documents that the Allies had never seen: Polish intelligence files, Soviet reports, and the testimony of Jakob Sporenberg, who had been executed in 1952 for war crimes but whose interrogation transcripts had been preserved. What Witkowski discovered shocked him. In Sporenberg's testimony, buried among accounts of atrocities and military operations, were detailed descriptions of the bell. Not just vague references, but specific technical details: dimensions, power requirements, test procedures, and most disturbingly, the fates of those who had worked on the project. Sporenberg claimed that in the final days of the war, as the evacuation of Der Reis began, approximately 60 scientists and technicians associated with the Bell project were executed. They were shot by SS firing squads and buried in mass graves in the surrounding forests. This wasn't simply to eliminate witnesses. This was the erasure of everyone who knew how the bell worked. But not everyone died in those forests. According to various accounts, in April 1945, a small group of high-ranking scientists and SS officers boarded aircraft at a secret airfield in Czechoslovakia. Their destination remains unknown. Some accounts place them in Argentina. Others suggest they flew to Norway, then to Spain, and from there, into the shadows of history. What we do know is that several Nazi submarines left Germany in the final weeks of the war and surrendered in Argentina months after Germany's official capitulation. What we also know is that several prominent Nazi scientists and officers were never captured, never tried, and never definitively accounted for. In the decades that followed, fragments of the Bell story continued to emerge. Former SS officers in memoirs published after their deaths made oblique references to a special project in Silesia. Documents released from Soviet archives mentioned a time manipulation device captured by Russian forces, though these documents provide no technical details and may be disinformation. Modern investigators have visited the site. They've examined the concrete structure, now overgrown with moss and surrounded by forest. They've used ground-penetrating radar to search for buried facilities. They've interviewed elderly residents who remember the war years, who speak of prisoners marching into the mountains, of strange sounds echoing through the valleys at night. But no physical evidence of the bell itself has ever been found. So what was the bell, really? Was it a hoax? A misidentification of conventional technology? Or was it something far more extraordinary? To understand the possibilities, we need to consider what German physicists knew in the 1940s. This was not a backward nation playing with primitive technology. Germany led the world in theoretical physics. Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, was directing Germany's nuclear research. German scientists had already split the atom. They understood relativistic physics. They were exploring concepts that wouldn't reach mainstream scientific discussion for decades. One theory suggests that the bell was an anti-gravity device. The counter-rotating cylinders containing mercury-like fluid, powered by enormous electrical currents, could theoretically generate intense magnetic fields. Some advanced propulsion theories propose that rapidly spinning, electrically charged fluids can create field effects that counteract gravity. Is this possible? In 2006, a European Space Agency researcher named Dr. Martin Tajmar, PUBLISHED papers, describing experiments in which rotating superconductors produced measurable gravitational anomalies. His work was controversial, but it demonstrated that the connection between electromagnetism and gravity might be more complex than we typically assume. A more radical theory suggests that the bell was an attempt to manipulate time itself. The accounts of victims aging rapidly, of vegetation dying around the device, of strange temporal distortions reported by witnesses, all of these could be consistent with a localized time dilation effect. Einstein's theory of general relativity tells us that time is not constant. Intense gravitational or electromagnetic fields can slow time down or speed it up. If the bell was generating fields of sufficient intensity, it might have created a region where time flowed differently than in the surrounding space. But here's where the story becomes even more intriguing. Some researchers have noted similarities between the descriptions of the bell and modern theories about torsion fields, theoretical constructs in physics that propose spinning energy fields can interact with the fabric of space-time itself. These theories are controversial, existing at the fringes of mainstream physics, but they're not impossible. And then there are the truly extreme theories, the ones that suggest the bell wasn't just a scientific experiment. It was a gateway, a portal. According to these accounts, the Nazi scientists weren't just studying exotic physics. They were attempting to access other dimensions. They were trying to reach beyond the limits of conventional space-time. This sounds like science fiction, but consider what we know. The Nazi regime was deeply invested in occult research. The Ananab, Himmler's personal research organization, sent expeditions to Tibet, to South America, to archaeological sites around the world, searching for ancient knowledge and artifacts. They were not simply interested in military technology. They were interested in power of a different kind entirely. Now, consider what happened after the war. As Operation Paperclip brought German scientists to America, as these men were integrated into U.S. military and aerospace programs, strange projects began to appear. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, reports of unusual aircraft began to proliferate. Objects that moved in ways that defied conventional aerodynamics. Craft that accelerated at impossible speeds, made right-angled turns, hovered silently. The U.S. military dismissed them as weather balloons and atmospheric phenomena. But some of these sightings occurred near military installations where former Nazi scientists were known to be working. In Nevada, at the facilities that would become Area 51. In New Mexico, at White Sands Proving Grounds. In Ohio, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In these places, secret projects continued. Projects with names that would only become public decades later. Projects that explored the boundaries of known physics. Was the Bell technology transferred to these American programs? Did it form the basis for projects we can only guess at? The official answer is no. The historical record shows no connection. But the historical record also showed no connection to Der Reich until Igor Vitkovsky opened those files in 1965. In recent years, Freedom of Information requests have revealed tantalizing fragments. A CI, a document from 1952 mentioning unconventional propulsion research based on recovered German technical data. A Defense Department memo from 1958 referring to time displacement field generators. An NSA file from 1961, almost entirely redacted with only a header visible. Project Kronos, temporal mechanics applications. Are these documents related to the Bell? We cannot say for certain. What we can say is that in the decades following World War II, the United States government invested heavily in exotic physics research. They studied anti-gravity. They studied time dilation effects. They studied field propulsion and space-time manipulation. Why would they study these things unless they believed such technologies were possible? And what knowledge did they inherit from the scientists of the Third Reich? Today, if you travel to the Owl Mountains in southwestern Poland, you can still visit the site. The concrete structure remains, weathered by 70 years of rain and wind, but standing. Local tour guides call it the Henge. They tell stories to tourists about Nazi experiments and secret weapons. Most people take photos and leave, treating it as just another World War II curiosity. But some visitors report strange sensations, feelings of disorientation, unexplained nausea, electronic equipment that malfunctions without explanation. Are these real effects, lingering contamination from whatever experiments occurred here? Or are they simply the power of suggestion, the mind creating what it expects to feel? Scientific surveys of the site have produced ambiguous results. Radiation levels are slightly elevated, but not dangerously so. The soil chemistry shows unusual compositions, but nothing that definitively proves exotic experiments. The concrete itself has been analyzed and shows nothing out of the ordinary. If the bell existed, it left almost no trace. The paper trail was equally frustrating. Most official Nazi documents relating to secret weapons projects were destroyed in the final days of the war. What survived was scattered across multiple countries, filtered through layers of allied intelligence agencies, classified and reclassified for decades. Modern historians remain divided. Some dismiss the bell as a myth, a misinterpretation of conventional technology mixed with post-war sensationalism. They point to the lack of physical evidence, the contradictions in eyewitness accounts, the tendency for wartime legends to grow in the retelling. Others argue that the circumstantial evidence is too compelling to ignore. The testimony of multiple witnesses who had no contact with each other, the existence of the Der Reich complex and its mysterious concrete structure, the documented deaths of scientists working on classified projects, the pattern of Nazi scientists disappearing in the war's final days, some resurfacing in South America, others never accounted for, and perhaps most compellingly, the continued classification of certain documents. 70 years after the war ended, there are still files that remain sealed, still reports marked top secret that reference Nazi research projects. If these projects were simply conventional weapons programs, why maintain such secrecy? The ruins in the Owl Mountains keep their secrets. The concrete stands silent. And somewhere in locked archives and classified databases, the full truth about Die Glocke, if there is a full truth, remains hidden. World War II ended in 1945, but the secrets of that war did not end with it. In hidden facilities, in classified projects, in the minds of scientists who crossed the line between nations and ideologies, knowledge persisted. Technology evolved. Questions multiplied. Was the bell real? Did Nazi scientists achieve something that mainstream physics said was impossible? And if they did, where did that knowledge go? We may never know with certainty. The witnesses are dead. The documents are destroyed or hidden. The scientists took their secrets to the grave, but the story endures, because somewhere in that story lies a truth about how close we came to a different ending, about how the desperate ambitions of a dying regime reached toward something beyond conventional warfare, about how the line between science and science fiction is not as clear as we like to believe. The bell may have been destroyed in the spring of 1945, or it may have been evacuated, hidden, its secrets preserved. We stand in the present, looking back at shadows and fragments, trying to assemble a picture of something that was meant to remain forever hidden. This is the nature of history's deepest mysteries. They do not offer us certainty, they offer us questions. And in seeking those answers, we discover that the past is never as settled as we think. If you want to explore more forgotten stories from World War II, more secrets that history tried to bury, subscribe to this channel, because every war leaves ghosts. And some ghosts carry technologies we are not yet ready to understand.